Hello, this is Figurative Language Lesson number 1. Let's start with some notes about figurative language. Now this is something that you've been exposed to quite a bit so far this year, so many of these concepts should not be new. Just in case, we'll do some basic review before moving forward. Here we go. When an author makes a comparison that creates a picture in the reader's mind, the author is using figurative language. I'm going to underline this term, figurative language. This was an important piece here where it defined this term. I'm going to put a little arrow over here to help me remember that. Two kinds of figurative language are simile and metaphor. In a simile, the word like or as is used to compare two things. This part here is really important. It's to compare two things. It's not to talk about two things, so comparing them. Here are some examples. The clouds looked like pillows. In a metaphor, two things are compared without those clue words. The clouds were pillows. So here I see a cloud is being compared to a pillow. Right, here's my bed, right? Those two things are not the same, but they're being compared. This, I know, means that the clouds must look soft and white and maybe fluffy. You can use these tips to interpret similes and metaphors. First thing is to ask yourself what two things are being compared. Then, ask yourself what is similar about those two things. And lastly, find a picture in your mind. As you read, you should look for the clue words, like or as, in a comparison to identify a simile. Make sure that you have the following notes completed before moving on to the next section. Here's our think about it. Read the paragraph below. Identify the figurative language and think about what it means. These striking pillars are the subject of many beautiful paintings. When you see their red shapes outlined against the sky, bright as a robin's blue egg, you might just want to paint a picture of them too. What clue word did we see? Let's go back through this. These striking pictures are the subject. I don't see any. I'm looking for the word like or as. Oh, here we go. Bright as a robin's blue egg. Here is my clue word. So the clue word that I see is the word as. What's being compared to a robin's blue egg? So we see, when you see their red shapes outlined against the sky, bright as a robin's blue eye. So here I say the robin's blue egg, and I see the sky is what they are comparing. So the sky is what is being described as bright as a robin's blue egg. So what does this simile mean? Well, I think of a sky, right? Something that is very bright here and hard to draw because it's just the color blue, versus a robin's egg. And robins are very famous for having these very bright blue eggs. So what they're saying is that the sky was a very bright blue, right, sky. Okay? That makes sense? Let's move on to the next section if you're ready. This section is about using a new reading strategy. And the reading strategy is monitor and clarify. When you monitor and clarify, you make sure you understand what you read. Obviously, this is very important. Monitor, which means check. I'm going to put a little check here to remind myself. Monitor or check your understanding by stopping to think about what you have read. Okay? So I'll remember that. I'm going to stop and think about what I read. Okay? Clarify or make clear what you have read by restating the ideas in your own words. So I'm making it more clear. I think about like the projectors at school, and when you play with the lens, you make it more clear. You clarify it. If something is unclear to you, go back and reread that part of the text. So I am going to add this word re to the read. You reread it. So you keep going back and rereading it until it's super duper clear. Okay? Now, let's go on, and we're going to start practicing with this skill. For our first practice, we're going to use what we learned with those reading strategies. So as we read, we're going to be monitoring and clarifying. So we'll make sure that what we're reading is making sense. We're going to look for clue words like an as, and we'll reread parts of the text to make more sense. Here we see the passage directions. Read the passage. Use the notes on the side to help you. Then answer the questions on the next page. Who do you think they are? Here, stone pillars seem to grow like trees. I'm going to circle this clue word. There are pillars everywhere. Some pillars are the height of a person. Others stand as tall as a 10-story building. This is Bryce Canyon, Utah. The stone pillars are hoodoos. Bryce Canyon is in a desert. Many mornings, frost drapes the canyon like icing on a cake. By afternoon, the canyon warms up and the frost melts away. This freezing and thawing helped to create the hoodoos. Water erosion helped too. The hoodoos are made up of layers of rock. The layers are colorful ribbons wrapped around the stone. Different kinds of rock wear away at different speeds. These differences result in the hoodoos' strange shapes. Some, called spires, are like great big arms reaching upwards. Ooh, I saw another clue word. Others are solid and broad, like a castle wall. Ooh. These striking pillars are the subject of many beautiful paintings. When you see their red shapes outlined against the sky, bright as a robin's blue egg, you might just want to paint a picture of them too. So I can check this off. I monitored for clue words to signal the similes. Did I monitor? Did I see what made sense? Here I saw, okay, they talked about that the stone pillars didn't actually grow like trees. They were these very tall, different height pillars called hoodoos. And they were in this place called Bryce Canyon, which is like a desert. And here in the canyon, water erosion created these tall spires of rock. And I guess they look like these. So that's monitoring. That's putting it into my own words. And clarifying, I reread to make sure it makes sense to me. So I might reread, for example, this bottom part. Or about the suggestion about how they are created. About water erosion helping make these pieces. Reread any sections that you need to in order to have full comprehension of the section. And when you're ready, place a check mark next to clarify, signaling that you can do the discussion questions. Now let's look at an example, which we'll do together. Choose the correct answer. Use the steps at the right to help you answer the question. In the first paragraph, the author compares the some pillars to a 10-story building to show ... Now, I think about this, when they ask me to show, this is like saying why. Why are they making this comparison? What are they trying to show me? Let's follow the step-by-step directions. First, we ask ourselves what two things are being compared. I know that these stone pillars, right, are being compared to a 10-story building. Those are the two things. So pillars and building. Ask yourself, what is similar about the pillars and a 10-story building? Well, I know that they are both very tall. Here our directions say, I see that the author writes these pillars stand as tall as a 10-story building. So I know the pillars in a 10-story building have great height. They are very tall. Our third step is to form a picture in our mind of the pillars. So I see pillars that are really tall, like an office building. And that's where we see my picture, right at the top. Make sure that you are taking these notes as well. Now I can go back to the question, since I have this picture in my mind. Our options are how tall the pillars are, how well built the pillars are, how people could live in the pillars, and how the pillars are in the shape of a building. So I think about this. The author compares the stone pillars to a 10-story building. They say they stand as tall as a 10-story building. I like this one, A, because it talks about how tall the pillars are. They didn't really talk about how well built the pillars are. In fact, they're not really built at all, because nature creates them. How people could live in the pillars, that's not even true. They didn't even mention anything about that. And D, how the pillars are in the shape of a building. Well, they're tall like a building, but they're not really in the shape of the building. So between these two options, I would select A, that the comparison is made to show how tall the pillars are. And this is unique because it would be very boring if they just said that the pillars were tall. It creates a much better image in my head to say that the pillars were as tall as buildings. Now it's time to do the practice questions on your own. I'll read the questions to you just in case. Number 1. Near the beginning of the second paragraph, frost is compared to ... We need to make sure that we go back to the beginning of this paragraph and we find where it talks about frost. And I see this phrase, many mornings, frost drapes the canyon like icing on a cake. Using that passage, you can answer question number 1. Number 2. How are layers and rock and colorful ribbons alike? I go back to the passage and I find where they talk about the layers of rock and colorful ribbon. Here I see that they talk about these right here. The hoodoos are made up of layers of rock. The layers are colorful ribbons wrapped around the stone. Okay, let's think about what this could mean. I also know that this is an example of a metaphor. They compare the layers of rock of the hoodoo to the colorful ribbons wrapped around the stone. So this is a comparison, but they don't use the word like, so this must be a metaphor. Now that I've referenced the text, I can answer question number 2. Number 3. The author compares spires to great big arms reaching upward because the spires, I don't really know what a spire is, but I bet I could find out in this passage. Here it talks about the spires. It says, these differences result in the hoodoo's strange shape. Some, called spires, are like great big arms reaching upward. All right, so here I see the question asked me, why do they compare the spires to great big arms reaching upward? What do we think this means? Go back to the passage and reference it, and then answer question number 3. Question number 4. In the phrase, solid and broad like a castle wall, which word is a clue that suggests this is a simile? Remember, what are the clue words for a simile? You can do that one all on your own. Now, if you've completed the lesson so far, you're ready to move on to Lesson 2. Find your tracker and check off Figurative Language Lesson 1. Then, turn to the next page in your packet and be ready for Lesson 2. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, a good review on figurative language.